Multicultural Center. And I've been in the role for about 10 years now, and I'm really thankful to have this opportunity to lead this discussion with our organization, and just, to really search out some recipes for racial justice and inclusion in Niagara. And we thought that we would use the approach of, a recipe, because when we all think about our various cultures, and we know that we really all celebrate food. We really all love to have food and get together. Hi, Andrew. Welcome. Join us. Thank you for joining us. And yeah, we like to get together. We like to have food. We like to celebrate food. So when we talk about a recipe, we're just thinking of the many layers of this thing called racism, and the many ingredients that would be required for this work of anti-racism. So just to give you an idea of where our organization is coming from, I just think I should share that we celebrate and we promote cultural and social change and economic inclusion and well-being of all immigrants and newcomers. I share that now because we know that this nation, like many nations, has been built on the strengths of newcomers and immigrants. And so I do believe that there's an intersection that we could consider. And so again, let's move forward with this session. So let me talk about our event goals. Hopefully you all got a chance to take a look at the press release, and hopefully you've been following us on our social media, checking out some momentum that we've been trying to create for this event. We have a great team of speakers, and we have a great team of staff here. And most importantly, we have a great team of participants here who are willing to get on board and do the work. So our discussion is going to be based on a response to two parallel pandemics, racism and COVID-19. With systematic racism fueling anti-Black and anti-Indigenous violence in our communities and disparities for racial, migrant, and queer groups, we must ask ourselves, how can we confront this plague of inequality in Niagara? So that's going to be the question that I want at the forefront of everybody's minds as we continue this discussion. And again, it's just, it's time for us to really just have the courage. It's time for us to expose ourselves and our vulnerabilities. I've always mentioned that secrets tend to have a power over us. So if we can just be honest with each other, we can overcome the power that those secrets can have. So definitely, again, let's have a great, wonderful session. And I'm just going to say a quick hello to a couple of others that popped in. Good afternoon, Don Shikluma. Welcome. Thank you for joining us from the Student Wellness at Brock University. Wonderful. Thank you. So I've already mentioned that we're going to be recording, so if anybody who joined late, please make your changes if you'd like to protect your anonymity. And I'm going to move into some housekeeping that we'd like to discuss before we get really started. All participants, we've asked that you stay muted until the Q&A, but we invite you to use the chat for questions and or concerns. So again, please stay muted. We know that our lives can be hectic. We know that a lot of us are possibly joining from home, possibly joining from the car, possibly joining from the beach. So we don't want to have any background noise. We don't want to have any interruptions. We want to really give our keynote speakers an opportunity to use this spotlight and use this platform to share some of their own recipes and some of their own strategies and some of the things that they are doing themselves, because ultimately we're all ambassadors for anti-racism. I know that myself personally, I like to think that everybody that I interact with, I have an opportunity to teach them something as much as they have an opportunity to teach me something. So again, let's have a wonderful session. And so I'm going to try my best now to provide our land acknowledgement statement. We had hoped to have an Indigenous community member present. Unfortunately, we were not able to get somebody, so please, apologies in advance if I manage to stumble on some words. The Niagara Folk Arts Multicultural Center acknowledges that we live, learn, and work on land that is the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe and the Kootenais peoples, and new home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We recognize that we are taking a first step in reconciliation by honoring the land and Indigenous heritage, which dates back over 10,000 years. Okay, awesome. I only stumbled a couple times, right? See, we're not all perfect, right? Okay, so moving on to safety considerations. It's really important that we stress the community safety. We want people to be comfortable to share. We want everyone to be comfortable to be vulnerable. We have a zero tolerance for racism and other forms of exclusion. So the community guidelines are going to be an activity that we're going to develop together. We want everybody to take part in developing these guidelines, and my superstar Jillian is going to assist me with this. We're going to launch a whiteboard, and we're going to start taking some input from our participants, because we certainly we want this to be a team effort. As much as this work is going to be a team effort, we really want everybody to feel as though it's not that we just set out some rules that we're going to go by, but we are encouraging everybody to participate. So thank you, Jillian. Just while we are getting ready to take some input, I'm just going to pop into the chat real quick and see if anybody could share a possible community guideline with us. Something like do not share any racial slurs. That's a good guideline. How about respect the speaker as they are speaking? Does anybody have any contributions to help me out? Because I think that I could go on and on. Don't be afraid to use that chat group, guys and gals and others. There we go. Thank you very much, Selah. Do not invalidate anyone's experiences. That is beautifully worded, and absolutely positively, we have to remember that each and everyone's individual experience is something that we can learn from, right? So thank you so very much. How about a safe and non-judgmental space? Wonderful. That's wonderful. And then I see that Bree has shared, be mindful and respectful of others around you. Also wonderful. That's great. That's great. Okay, and Leela, thank you very much for your submission. Make this a brave space and have some empathy for mistakes. Awesome. In reading Bree's suggestion there, I want to remind everybody that it takes honesty to admit that you may or may not have a bias, and it's up to us to make sure that if somebody does expose a bias, we're not going to attack them. We're not going to make them feel like they're some sort of monster. We're going to take it as an opportunity to educate them, right? So it's all about making sure that people do not feel attacked. So let's go back to our list. I think I see that we have quite a few more. And in an effort to make sure that we stay on track, I'm going to pop up and I'm going to add one more. Remember to respond and not react. That's awesome. Thank you very much, Andrew. And I'm taking a peek at the time. We're at 12:12. So thank you to everyone who contributed to our community guidelines. Now that we've agreed that we have some guidelines, I want to remind all of our participants that my co-host Jillian's role is going to be the removal of any participants who do not respect the agreed upon discussion guidelines. I think that's fair that now that we've agreed to these guidelines, that anybody who does not respect them will be ejected. You'll have an opportunity to wait in the waiting room. We will reach out to you to explain what you may or may not have done to get yourself ejected. And it's in that effort to educate you further for these ongoing discussions. So I got about 2 more minutes before my deadline. So I'm gonna get right into the meat and the potatoes, yes. And for our vegetarian friends, I'm gonna get into the maybe what do we got? Some vegetables? Yeah, okay. So we have Sam's gonna speak on and give us some insight as to what the youth are going to possibly be looking at or possibly doing these days. He's the organizer of the St. Catherine's protest that happened last week. We have Cassandra, who is one of our partners, who is also known for being the blogger for the Fit Nerdy Mom. If you haven't checked her out already, please do. She's doing amazing things in anti-racist and biracial parenting. We have Sherry Darlene, who is the emerging activist who gave us the Niagara Falls protests. Thank you so very much, Sherry Darlene, for that. And then we have Miss Shannon. She's a human rights and social justice worker and arts facilitator. We have encouraged everybody to share their social media information. If it is not, if it's not available during this presentation, we'll make sure that it's available when we share the follow-up video and also the resources that we're going to possibly get into during this session. So I'm just gonna have a quick peek at my time. I got 1 more minute to say something inspirational. So I'm going to use that 1 minute to give you a quote from Kwame Alexander. It's from the book called The Undefeated. And this revolution that we are taking part in, I thought it was applicable because the quote is, "This is for the unforgettable, the unafraid, the undefeated." So I just want everybody to let that sit on the forefronts of their mind as we engage in this conversation. So I didn't give you any participation instructions, but we'll do that during the Q&A. So I'm officially going to turn the floor over to this young man who is taking the revolution and doing some things. So the floor is yours, Sam. Go ahead. Or don't go ahead. And I think we might be having some technical difficulties. Let me just see what I can do to see where is Sam? Where is Sam? Did we lose Sam? You know, when you have 70 participants, it's really hard to scroll through and find one. There we go.
All right, we're good. Yeah, I just had to be unmuted, but thank you for having me.
You're welcome.
So I'm gonna begin by saying good afternoon, everybody. I'm Samuel Loyson Como. I've lived in St. Catherine's for the past 6 years, but I was originally born in Dallas, Texas. Moved quite a bit. I lived in England for about 4 years, Zimbabwe for about 3 years. So I guess I could say I've had quite experience when it comes to how the world functions and how society is shaped around different demographics and different walks of life. For my experience as a Black man, it's been very different wherever I went. My experience in England, for example, was an experience of because I was kind of in like a smaller area. If you've ever been to England, I lived in Worcester, and Worcester was at the time I don't know how it is right now because I haven't been in like over 10 years, but it was a very small area, very closed off. Not a lot of Black people area. I hope you can still hear me. Can everybody hear me? Thumbs up if you can hear me. Yep. All right. Thank you. So it's a small area, and I was rather young. So this was when I was just really trying to really come up. These were my early years, and it was sometimes met with a certain amount of hostility in social circles. Didn't always fit in. I was a little rowdy, as a little boy, just a bit on the aggressive side, but yeah, it wasn't. I feel like at the time I wasn't necessarily open with welcoming arms, but in some spaces I was, and that discrepancy that was the time when I first got introduced to anything that had to do with race, anything that had to do with the idea that because you are different, we do not necessarily like you or really identify with you, and that was thankfully, I have very, very intelligent parents. My parents are amazing people. they essentially introduced me to the concepts that that really guided my mind to understand what it is to be a Black person in the Western world, or what it is to be a Black person in the Eastern world, wherever you are. And I've always taken that as a framework to kind of push myself. So as I've lived here, I've kind of established myself as I pretty much grew up here. I came here when I was about 11 years old. Came here, and I've been here ever since. And I've made this place my home because this is where I've made a lot of my memories. This is where I've identified. And to also know that, the city of St. Catherine has such deep roots with, the Underground Railroad and, the different things that have happened with, conductors bringing slaves from the United States into Canada and giving people that amount of freedom. It echoed in my own life because I came here with a family of refugees, and we came here looking for a better life than what we had before. Yes, I had traveled prior, but coming from back home in Zimbabwe, where I was at the point, things were turbulent, and we came to look for a new opportunity, to look for essentially the American dream, but in Canada, because we just seemed like it was more realistic in Canada. It's a place of promise. And to see that repeated throughout history is an amazing thing. But at the same time, you do recognize that there are those loose ends. There are those things that do not necessarily add up. And as a black man myself, there are moments where I have been quick to anger because I'm just like, I know how the world can be. I know how the world should be. Why isn't it that way? And it's a difficult thing to come to terms with. And a lot of the time, I feel like for most Black youth, we come to that realization at a very young age. I was aware of my race as young as maybe 4 years old. If I asked any white person my age, when have you ever been aware of race? Some may not even say I'm aware at all. Like some may not even have that idea that, oh, race is really a concept, but it is. And there's little things that remind you that because of your race, you are put in a certain pedestal, you're put in a certain place in the world, whether it's in the schooling system, whether it's in policing, we'll get onto that, whether it's even in the workplace, in social circles. There's a lot of different conversations, a lot of different slurs that you hear, and some may have no ill intention, but there is an ill intention in the way that it comes across, and it does affect the individual. It definitely affected me. So understandably, I had a lot of anger. I had a lot of, I didn't understand why it was that way, and I needed an outlet. So I kind of turned to art. I've always been very artistic. I've always been an individual that was very expressive because from a young age, I picked up a pen, I started on my grandfather's walls, his office, took a pen, started like drawing all over his walls. He did not like that. But instead of yelling at me, he said, just take this paper and do it on paper from now on. And from there, I never stopped. Like I kept drawing on and on, like never stopped. And that was my first introduction into a form of expression, because even though I was that young, I was having fun with it. But now I was able to speak to people or show people how I'm feeling through my art. And I should have showed you some of the things that I had. You know what? I will post something on my social media or something like that. I'll figure some way to do it. But yeah, I've been drawing ever since. And then recently I came to music as an outlet because I've always loved hip hop specifically. I always look back to the Talib Kweli's, the Redman, Method Man, the Tupac Shakur's, like all of those different rappers. And I've always been amazed by the way they could put words together and explain their walk of life from a very to observe where they're living and to really speak that feeling into the people that listen to it. And I feel like for me, that's a very important thing that I need to do, especially where I live, because I feel like with my music, I have the ability to say the things that are uncomfortable, but at the same time that are realistic. And to give people that point of view that they would not necessarily have is an essential help people understand racial inequality is, to understand what systemic inequality is. And not even just with Black people, even with indigenous people in this country who are going through so much on a regular basis. And I just want to take a moment to acknowledge that, because there are different systems that have almost put us in a different state of mind, not even a different state of mind, to put us in a different position than others would otherwise have. And it's important to address those. So I come in here almost asking to learn from you guys, and also to express my experience. So recently, to commit myself to that, I started writing an album. I've done a bunch of concepts and trying to just visualize the things that I'm thinking about. And I can actually share with you a little something that I did at the protest, but I was actually inspired by, well, inspired is a very hard word to use. I would say that I was awakened by what happened to George, just to put that out there. It really brought me to understand that this is nothing new, and it's been a repeating cycle. And, people need to understand that these things come again and again. And so many times we brush it under the rug, or like, oh, this doesn't exist here, But I think it's time that we allow ourselves, especially as the youth, to not just voice our opinions, but to also act on our opinions, to also start looking for changes in our communities. So I started off, I'll say a little verse right now, but start off by saying, it's a Sunday service with the holy sermon. Let the preacher tell them that change is coming, because the road to revolution was cultivated by my ancestors with their blood on their leaves, brutally beaten Black and blue and hung in some public view to set an example so the witnesses fearing too. The Willie Lynch theory repeats 100 times. The Willie Lynch theory production televised. And when I say that right there, I'm saying that we've seen this over and over again. The Willie Lynch theory, if you don't know anything about Willie Lynch was a slave owner who used some very brutal tactics to control the people and to incite fear in the masses. And when I look at these public killings of Black men, and I look at these public killings of Black women and children, it's the Willie Lynch theory repeating itself. You're seeing the idea that if I set an example of a rebellious individual, or an individual that is not adhering to my standard of what you should be, you will see that person suffer, and you're supposed to feel that yourself. And we all felt that. That's why we're all in these streets protesting. That's why we're all voicing our opinions, and that's why we're all so hurt, because these things are not being voiced in the right way. So I wanted to make sure that was punched in, and I will release that single. I did it for the protest specifically as the debut there, but that single will be released as well as in my albums when they come out. But in the past, music was an outlet to express fun. Now I kind of feel like my music should have, I want to reflect what I see, no matter what. I want to reflect my experience, and that's a very important thing for me. So to end that off, because I don't want to take up too much time, I just want to say, I want to highlight the importance of art when it comes to any kind of revolution. Without art is the last resort of freedom. So you could have laws that protect you, you could have all sorts of systems in place, but once those things fail, what do? You turn to the voices that are in the streets. You turn to the voices that are among your people. And artists are the people that channel those voices around them, or even channel their own voices too. I kind of feel like a lot of the time I'm channeling the voices around me, and also I try to channel voices of people that cannot speak for themselves. And I think it's important to have those discussions and to allow for art like that to be expressed, and to not just allow it, promote it, And yeah, I'm gonna just end off like that, and I'd love to hear what you guys have to say. Yeah, so that's my little spiel right there.
That was amazing. Wow, thank you so very much, Sam. again, it's just it's so awesome to hear this coming from such a young man with such wisdom. So thank you so very much for sharing. Wow, I'm taken aback. So I'm going to turn the floor over to Cassandra now, and you know, I don't know if I got enough Kleenex, but here we go. Cassandra, you're on.
Hi, everybody. Can everyone hear me? Oh, can everybody hear me? Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for being here. So, where to begin? What a big topic. So I'm going to just take a deep breath and dive into this. I know that speaking about race and racism and even hearing the topic is very uncomfortable for most of us, including myself, because I think it's important for me to share that, because despite that discomfort, here I am showing up and speaking about this. Despite that discomfort, I do feel it's important work. And what's given me the courage to start doing this work of anti-racism and really starting to advocate for anti-racism is understanding the power of communication, understanding storytelling and its tremendous potential for positive changes. Because if historical events and recent events are of any indication, it's that changes really need to be made. And in my experience, I've learned that oppression and racism thrives off isolation. It thrives off that discomfort and awkwardness, that same discomfort and awkwardness that I feel myself, because I'm not immune to it. But that feeling that convinces a lot of us, well-meaning people, to avoid entire topics instead of examining them fully and bringing the darkness to the light. So keeping it under wraps serves nobody, and I know that now, and that's why I'm here doing this important work. So I apologize if I get emotional in advance. I made the mistake um, of being on social media, first of all, lately has been very heavy because of the atrocities being brought to the light. It's a blessing in disguise, because it's because of this ability to share in such high volumes that the movement is really taking on a force of its own, and people are really starting to wake up to some ideas that have always been there, some beliefs and some things that have always been going on, but you know, we can live in our own little bubbles. I admit that. So humanity shares so much: two lungs, one heart, blood, muscles, bones, eyes, fingers, toes. We also share our brains, these incredible built-in biological supercomputers that are so incredible that we have the ability to learn and unlearn continuously and then evolve to become better versions of ourselves. In fact, our brains are so absolutely incredible, and it blows me away that even without you trying to learn something, you're learning something. At any given moment, every single thing that you look at, everything you hear, everything you see in the media, you're learning something from it. Even if you're not consciously sitting there taking notes and there's not going to be a test about it, the lessons are being there. Your brain is a is a supercomputer that's constantly calibrating, measuring, it's constantly finding patterns constantly. We can't stop it. It's what makes us so amazing at adapting and evolving. Um, but that same gift of being able to, that same gift that allows us to make an opinion, come to conclusions, and get hunches about something. It's also the curse that creates racial bias. It's also, you know, if all we see in the media are pictures and representations of people of color demonized over and over again, crimes over and over again, even if we wholeheartedly know, you know, people of color that are beautiful people, even if we have neighbors and friends that we love that are people of color, there's still that belief, there's still that that bias is still there, you know. And I like to use the example, like, it's dark, your phone is dead, the Uber isn't here yet, you know what I mean? And you have to ask somebody for help, and the first person and the only person that you see is a man. a man with a certain, swag. There's something about his style that tells you like, ooh, like maybe he's, maybe he's street smart. Maybe there's something about him that may suggest something to you. Do you look for another person, or do you tap his shoulder and take that chance? That fear, that doubt, even I have it. I'm not immune to it. Everybody has it. So I just want to make that clear, that this awakening that's happening, this all of these terms that are coming to light, like white privilege is being discussed so openly, and terms like white fragility, terms like um, white supremacy, all of these things that are coming to light. It's not white specific. It's not specific, and we're not immune as people of color either. It's everybody. It's universal. And I know a lot of people are feeling attacked right now on social media, and I just want to make that clear, that the goal is not to attack an entire people. That's not the goal. That's the goal of racism. That's what racism does. That's not the goal of this movement. Black Lives Matter is not working to oppress an entire population. And I think it's important for me to note that. So I'm here to talk about parenting. I've been blogging. FitNerdyMom.com is my way of giving to the world what I wish existed. So all of the information that I post on my blog is stuff that I looked up because I'm a new mom and my kids are young and I'm still learning as I go. And when you have kids, it doesn't come with a manual. It doesn't. Unfortunately, it's kind of like, there you go. Here's your squabbling baby. Good luck, and it's scary to me. And as somebody that likes to study and overstudy, and I like to be prepared and I like to plan, it's hard. It's very difficult because every single day is different, and children are very unpredictable. Every day is different. So one of the ways in which I find comfort and solace is books. I read a ton of books. I consume a ton of content. And I know a lot of people don't have that curiosity and that time, and it's a luxury. So what I do is I do a lot of summarizing these books. Even if you don't have time to read, I think everybody can learn lessons and should learn lessons. So my blog, fitnerdymom.com, is all about putting out that good information out there, because there's so much bad information out there. There's so much bad advice. There's so much unsolicited advice from strangers out there when it comes to parenting. And I was kind of getting sick of it. So this is kind of like my way of contributing to that not knowing. So when it comes to children and raising children with the goal of raising them to be anti-racist, which I hope is a goal that we all share here today, telling our kids to be kind to everybody, it's not enough, because I'm not suffering. Like I'm married to a white man. My husband is German, and I'm, you know what I mean? The kindness is already there, but despite that kindness, people are still dying because of racism. So being kind is not enough. And I really want to make that clear. It takes more intention to raise your children in an anti-racist way. And an example I'd like to give, but before that, the reason for that is because there's a history of racism. Because to justify the colonization, the slavery, and the tragic genocide of entire populations of Black and Indigenous people of color throughout history, good people had to be convinced to justify all of those atrocities. They had to be. And there was only one way to do that. It was to dehumanize them. So that work, it took a long time to convince people that Black people, darker skin, Indigenous people were lesser than. We're closer to animals. Don't have too much pity. Let's just do this work so we can get this done. It was all about power. But in order to convince an entire people to do this work, because that millions of lives were taken, like millions of lives, like it's in our history books, like, you know what I mean? Canada wasn't discovered. It wasn't barren land, and it wasn't just like Christopher Columbus discovered land. They hopped on in, and it's like, here, build. And it wasn't like that. There were millions and millions of lives that were taken, and that isn't in our history books. And I think that's tragic, and it continues to happen to this day in overt ways. So there's a quote I'd like to share from a book I read recently. It's it says this: it is no secret to many of us that we have internalized racist and sexist notions of beauty that lead many of us to think that we're ugly. And the media have bombarded us with stories that white children are cleaner and nicer. The white-dominated media presents this knowledge to us as if it's some kind of defect to Black life that creates such aberrant and self-negating behavior, and notes white, and as if it's not white supremacy. This comes from Bell Hooks in a book called Sisters of the Yam. So there's an HBO documentary called Girls Like Me, and it was made actually by a 17-year-old girl named Kiri Davis. She recreated the famous experiment from Dr. Kenneth and Marie Clark in 1940 that was the doll experiment, which took young children aged from 3 years old to 7 years old to do what was called then a doll test. This test was simple. There were two identical dolls. However, one was Black and one was white, but the same doll, same clothes, same size, same everything else, except for the skin color. And they were put in front of these children who would then ask the series of questions, like, which one do you like more? Which one would you rather play with? And the kids just pointed. Other examples of the questions is, can you show me which one of these two dolls looks bad? And the child in the video that I watched, and it really breaks my heart, but the child in preschool, she was 3 years old, she picks the Black doll over the white doll, despite the fact that herself is a little Black girl. And when the child was asked, why do you think this doll looks bad? She simply answered, because she's Black. And when the child was asked about the nice doll, why do you think this doll is nice? She simply said, because she's white. And then she was asked, can you give me the doll that looks like you? And she hesitates for a split seconds, but she hands over the Black doll, the one that looked like her. So the dolls in both Clark and Davis's studies were identical in every way, again, except for the color of the skin. And the thing with this is that nobody sat this little girl down, 3 years old, nobody sat her down to tell her that she was inferior. Nobody sat her down to tell her that she was uglier than, or lesser than, or less kind than because of her skin color. It's something that she happened to absorb because of the world that we live in, because of the way that the media works, because of the lack of representation in every single space that she looks at. If the only time that she sees people of color are when they're being, crucified or vilified, or, what ideas does that give her? So many of us have been conditioned to believe the same things, that white people are prettier people, that all of their traits and physical attributes are more suitable than our own ugly features. Even in modern day dynamics, this negative propaganda still continues in the following 3 ways. Number 1, white is right, because Black beauty seems to be like the antithesis of white norms. So it's like the further we go to European standards, the lower we find ourselves on the beauty scale. An example I can think of is in my own household. I have a photo here of my 2 biracial sons, and this is pretty exclusive because I usually don't share their faces on social media for my own personal choice, but this is them right here, my 2 little boys. Felix and Ollie, baby Ollie and big boy Felix. Now, my boy at 3 years old has already noticed how many more compliments that his baby brother gets, because his eyes are lighter than his, because his hair texture, his curls are looser than his. And he's already noticed. Nobody sat him down to tell him that this was better or worse than, but he's already asked me questions, and he's already noticed, due to the amount of times, because when people visit babies, they're gushing over babies, but the amount of times that people have used him to describe and compare him to his brother, say like, wow, his hair is looser than, it's so nice, it's looser than Felix's hair. Oh, look, his eyes are lighter, like their lighter eyes are so beautiful, look at those eyes. And people are already gushing over these features in front of my son, has given him that same narrative that the little girl from the research, the same narrative that lighter is better, looser curls are better, lighter eyes are better, lighter everything is better. The same narrative, I can see it within my own household, it's happening. So I have to catch that. That's one of my jobs. But number 2, another way that this continues to happen is colorism within the Black community or within communities of color. Because I've studied international development, it was my first career, and I've traveled even when I was in Ecuador, South America, it seemed to be the case. Anytime there was a darker skinned person of the family, they'd call her La Negra, which means the black one. Even they were the butt end of all the jokes, and because they happened to have a small hue of a tan, the Ecuadorians, like native Ecuadorians, are darker skinned, and that's not a bad thing. Not in my books, but it seems to be the going trend. It's not just in America. It's not just in Canada. It seems to be global. Even when I was in Africa, it seemed to be the case. And even within the Black community, for example, my mom, she always told me, like, I happen to be a couple half shades. I want to say half shades because that's literally how insignificant it is to me, but a couple half shades lighter than my brother and my mom. And she used to say the things like, why would you go in the sun? Why would you ruin that? You're so beautiful. And it's like, Mom, the beauty does not end with a little bit of a tan. Like, I love the sun. I will sunbathe all day. And she couldn't stop me from sunbathing. And she thought it was a tragedy. And that was within my own home. Good thing I was strong-willed and a natural born rebel, because if I wasn't, that it could have really added to my insecurity, because even if I'm the latest in my family, I'm still Black, and a lot Blacker than all the white people that surround me every day. And for me to think that's a bad thing and internalize that self-hate is not a good place to be, and it's not a good place to live. Number 3, hair.
Absolutely. I'm sorry, absolutely. Cassandra, I really
Am I
love.
10 minutes?
Yes, I love it. And, I was so captivated that I almost forgot to keep track of the time.
Oh, okay.
Thank you so very much for just sharing some personal experience. I really want to say that a lot of us participants could probably relate on so many levels, and you shared so eloquently, and I would love to be able to just let you go on and on, hanging on every word. But I do want to share this spotlight with everybody else. I'm hoping we can come back to you. I'm hoping you can continue to share. But most importantly, I'm really hoping that everybody participating here heard what you were saying and is able to, to expose their own biases as well, to share their own experience as well. And I hope that we can come back to you in question and answer time. But for now, I got to say thank you so very much. I'm going to turn the floor over to Sherry Darlene. You're all set, Ms. Sherry? There you go. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Hi, thanks. Can you hear me? Everybody can hear me? Good, okay. I just want to thank everybody for joining, and thank you for having me. I'm just going to dive right in because I'm so nervous, and I don't know why, but I am, because there's a lot of things I think that need to be said, and we need to touch on a lot of things in order so that you guys at home watching have a little something to move forward with and go into the world and spread it. So first off, I'll tell you that I'm from Niagara Falls, Ontario. I was not born here. I was brought here when I was 4 years old from Buffalo, New York. The majority of my father's side is in the United States. My mother was born and raised in Niagara Falls in Canada. My grandmother also born and raised in Niagara Falls. My mom told me the other day that she remembers a cross being burned on their front lawn back in here in Niagara Falls. So it's just things like that nobody would ever think that was going on here, but it's so worldwide, and we have to. We're at a point now where, I'm sorry, my computer keeps moving. We're at a point now where I think the world has had enough, and more importantly, white people. I don't know where this awakening is coming from, but I appreciate it. I think all Black people are appreciating that you're with us in this fight, and we need you. We need the good white people to come forward and stand beside us. We speak about Justice for Black Lives just released a video the other day, and I was receiving a lot of emails on, we came to the demonstration, it was great, we felt great. How do we move forward in our everyday lives at work and at home with being part of the, fight for change? So Justice for Black Lives did drop a video the other day with, guidelines on how, as a white person, you can go out into the world and be anti-racist. And one of the things that we really touched on was, power to truth. And the truth is that there's a bubble, much like Cassandra said, there is a bubble. And we live outside the bubble, the Black people, and white people, you're inside your bubble. And inside your bubble, you know, life is good. Sure, I'm not going to minimize people's struggle and there's health issues and things like that. But for the most part, things are good inside your bubble. And there's not going to be any significant change until that bubble gets popped. And when your bubble gets popped, which I think is happening now, you're coming along and you're seeing that as Black people, we've just been on the outside looking at your bubble. That bubble must be great. We've been on the outside because that's not our reality. There's two very different realities for a Black person and a white person. And we're really working hard now to, you know, really get white people to understand our reality. And with that, you can move forward with us and change. It's so important that we have you as our ally, because I often get in a lot of trouble because of my mouth. My mother always said that mouth was either going to get you in trouble or make you a lot of money, one or the other. I don't know. That's what I've been told since I was a little girl. But I often do get in a lot of trouble. And I realize, as I said before in a previous meeting that we had, is that I've always been outspoken about race. I've always been outspoken about injustices, even if it was not against a Black person. If I was somewhere and I witnessed ignorance, I was the one to stand up and say, hey, you know, pump your brakes. Where's that coming from? You know, that's ignorant, right? I was always that person to do that. And with that being said, that's what everybody has to take on now. Everybody's got to be, you can't not sit, like, you can't sit and witness that and not say anything. Even if you're, you know, in your head, you're saying to yourself, I'm not racist. You may not be racist, but you need to be anti-racist. By you sitting and not saying anything and remaining silent, you're just condoning the behavior. I can remember, I just did an interview a few days ago with the Brock Press, and I was kind of giving her, you know, a few scenarios of the lifelong racism that I've endured. And it just came to light to me as I was speaking to her. I said, you know, all those instances, and I'm 48 years old, so you can imagine, and I've been in Canada since I was 4, so you can imagine the countless. Not one person, not one white person ever stood up and said, excuse me, what you're saying and what you're doing is ignorant. Leave that young lady alone. Nobody ever came to my aid. Nobody. And I guess I got so used to it that I never really thought about it. And I just did literally 3 days ago during that interview, because I was trying to think of something, you know, because she said to me, well, was there anybody around? There was always people around. There were people who knew exactly what was going on in the workplace. Nobody ever said anything. So we got to stand up. We got to stop being okay, being quiet. We got to stop worrying about who's going to like us, who's not going to like us. You know, am I not going to get that promotion? At the end of the day, this is how it has to happen. This is how change is going to be implemented. And you know what? If you're scared, stay home. That's what my dad used to always say. If you're scared, stay home, because we don't have any room for scary people. You have to stand up. You have to do what's right. You have to say what's right. And you have to be beside us. That's why I'm like imploring to the good white people out there. We need you, because we've been knocking at this door for decades, centuries, I'd even say. We've been knocking at this door. You've been, you know, the white people have been opening it, saying, you know, we see you, we hear what you're saying, but you still can't come in, right? Closing the door. That's what's been happening, right? So I don't know if anybody's realized, but we've kicked the door in now. The door is gone. We've kicked it in. We're walking in now, and we need you to walk in that door with us. We need you to walk in the door with us, stand beside us. When you see ignorance, you see something, say something. Don't worry, and be prepared. Like I'm really big in creating our generation's next leaders. You know what I mean? Like, don't be afraid to say anything. You know, teach your children, like Cassandra was saying, teach your children. Being kind is not enough. Being kind is not enough. I'll tell you, one day my son came home and he said, Mommy, he said, the kids are picking on, there was an Asian boy in his class. And he said, a lot of the kids are picking on him. And I said, well, what are you doing? Well, I don't do it. I said, but what do you do when they're doing it? Well, I don't see anything. I said, I want you to go to school and I want you to make him your best friend. I want you to put your arm around him. I want you to make him make yourself his best friend. And I want you to let him know that you're with him and you're not going to let that happen to him anymore. And if somebody says something to him, you say something back. You stand up for him. You help him out, because there's nothing worse in this world than feeling alone in your fight, and people are not understanding. I think the reason why things have aligned themselves so well for me now is because over time, I've learned that, again, I've always been delivering this message, but I did it being led by anger, because I was angry and frustrated. And I was trying to convey to people of other races how deep this was and how they just didn't understand. And I was just, I felt like my anger and my aggression they would see how upset I was, and it would make them understand me more, but it really was not getting through. So I think with age comes wisdom. And I've realized that I'm not angry anymore. I'm not angry anymore. I'm approaching this with, here it is. Here's the reality. You may not like what I say. You may not want to hear it, but this is what's really going on. And what are you going to do what are you going to do moving forward? I'm not apologizing anymore for my Blackness. I'm not sugarcoating white people's ignorance anymore. I won't do it. I won't smile or laugh or just put my head down pretending because I need my job, because I don't want to be written up, and I did that a lot at work because I have a child. He was in school. I had to raise this child. I had to feed this child. So I did that a lot. I wasn't happy with it, and I internalized, and I think that's where a lot of my anger came from, because I was holding that stuff in. And I would come home and rant and, break stuff around the house, you know what I mean? Because that kind of stuff I was carrying around inside of me. So I don't know if I'm close to my time, but I just really, 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 really passionately want to reiterate that white people, we need you in this. We need you in this, because we can all agree that racism and white privilege has been left untouched. And in doing so, it's become powerful and untouchable. And it's time for us to take that power back. And it's time to put our hands all over it, because it can't be untouchable anymore. That's exactly, we got to get our hands in there. And, we have got to realize this is a reality. And I want to thank everybody who came out on June 6th. It was amazing. And so many wonderful opportunities have come from that. We are actually working with, I've gotten a call from Niagara College. They want to do a whole section in the library new. I've gotten a call from the Niagara Falls Museum. We're going to do a whole exhibit, North to Freedom. And we're going to include the events of June 6th as the here and now, what's happening now, and how we can move forward. So I'm calling out to anybody and everybody that was there. If you have photos, signs, masks, please go to justiceforblacklives.com and get us an email and get us those photos, get us those videos, get us your signs, get us your masks, because we are going to have an exhibit in the museum from September to December.
Awesome, 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 awesome. Wow, Sherry Darlene, pure awesomeness. Thank you so very much for giving us yet another ingredient as we search for this recipe. And again, having grown up in St. Catharines, I could relate to so many of the different things you were saying. And again, it's really important to recognize that we do have work to do, and recognizing that this time it'll be different if we can stand in unity. We can hold hands and walk through that door together, because the time is now. 2020 is the year of change. And that being said, I'm going to turn the floor over to the beautiful and bright Miss Shannon. It's all yours. Go ahead.
Thank you. I really appreciate being invited here today. And thanks everyone for joining. I'd also like to thank the folks who spoke before me, Sam, Cassandra, and Sherry Darlene. You're a lovely act to follow, and you covered so many important things. And so it's actually kind of nice, because what I wanted to talk about has been touched on in several ways by several of you. But I took the recipe concept very seriously, so I have 3 ingredients to discuss, because I think they're important, and I feel like they get talked about in a very vague way. So let's maybe see if we can open up the conversation to be a little bit more specific, so that people feel like they know what to do and what to explore. So the first thing I want to talk about is the importance of curiosity. It's really, really important to understand that your worldview isn't static, and it shouldn't be. Our worldviews are formed throughout our lifetimes by how we were raised, the households we grew up in, who we met and knew and saw as young people, how we got to know them, how those experiences were for us, where we found moments of trauma, where we found moments of love, media, or educational paths. Any number of factors help us form our worldviews, but it's important as adults to realize that it isn't static. It doesn't have to stay that way. And the ways to be open to your worldview expanding and adjusting and adapting over time is to cultivate curiosity. To be curious allows you to be interested in the unknown, because there's so much that is unknown. My world is not the whole world. Even if I get really, really familiar with my set of circumstances and my community and my space, there will always be an infinite number of dimensions that I haven't explored and haven't encountered. And that's okay. It's all right to be only aware of some of the world. It's a big place. It's a big existence. And we will always have more to learn and more to understand and more to experience. And it behooves us to be curious about that rather than afraid. It's to our benefit to enjoy a curious mind and to wonder about the world and what might be possible. I've been having this conversation a lot lately around defunding the police. There are definitely folks who get really hesitant around just the phrase defund the police. And I'm always quick to ask, why haven't you thought, what could that look like? Why is your first reaction to insist it can't be possible? Because the world that you understand so far has a very, very well-funded police department. There are ways to envision a world that doesn't look like the world we have now. I'm not sure I think inclusion is really about making sure everybody fits into the world that we recognize and know. This social structure isn't working, and that is so clear. And so it's not about making sure everyone fits into it. We really need to look at how we can change it and expand it and make it a world and a social structure and fabric that keeps everybody safe and equitable. And so curiosity, I think, is a really key first step for that. The second thing I wanted to talk about is discomfort. Cassandra touched on this a little as well, that this is uncomfortable work. I am incredibly uncomfortable. It is not my life goal to go around explaining why my life matters, why I am a human being, and why I am a person that deserves to exist. That is not what I would like to be spending my time on this planet doing. And I think it's outrageous that anybody ever has to. It is absolutely unforgivable that any human being has to explain out loud with words why their life matters. And that is the position we're in because we're in a racist system, and in a racist system, we are conditioned to ignore pain. We're conditioned to ignore our own pain, and we're conditioned to ignore the pain of others. And so we have, and I say collective we because you have joined this conversation. So step one in your curiosity box, good job. But we collectively exist in this framework that makes it so we are tricked into thinking that other people's pain and suffering is just how it has to be. And that's simply untrue. It is a lie. There is no reason that we can't imagine a world where we recognize and acknowledge and see other people's pain and actively work to prevent it, to end that form of harm. But it's really uncomfortable. In order to do that, we have to engage in empathy. We have to engage in a practice of understanding that we make mistakes, that there are times when we are wrong, but there are times when we benefit from the harm of others. And we are in a system that designs our lives that way. So it's going to be uncomfortable to acknowledge our complicity in that. It doesn't necessarily mean you're racist. And I mean, there are definitely racist people and they're the worst. And I don't know all of you, so I don't know where you are in this continuum. But regardless of whether or not somebody is racist, we exist in a racist, oppressive system, and that's what we can actively focus on. That is the work we can do to dismantle that system and really work towards the prevention of harm for the future. But we can't do it without acknowledging that we make mistakes. We can't acknowledge it. We can't do it without acknowledging we have biases. We can't do it without acknowledging that in the past we have witnessed harm or known about harm and done nothing. That doesn't mean we have to keep doing that. We can change as we go and work through that discomfort. It's fine. Discomfort is fine. We need it to help us be accountable. And accountability is hard work. When we see something, when we participate in something, when we realize that something has happened that we know is wrong, we can say out loud, I know that's wrong. I don't know why I did it, or I don't know why I let it happen, or I don't know what to do next. But it doesn't make sense to continue to ignore pain and harm when we know it exists. It's not a secret. We don't need to build awareness about it. It exists. Racism exists. It's here. It's been here all along. We need to move past the getting aware of it and coming to know it in order to be able to do things like name it, identify it, and change it. And then the third thing I wanted to talk about was finding the good. And I really feel like that's a really important one and kind of a tricky one, because in a revolution, it seems so fraught with anger and with pain and with tragedy and with trauma, and it is. But it also is important that we look for the good. We can't move forward. We can't keep fighting. We can't keep participating in revolutionary acts without strength, and strength comes from joy. So look around at the community we're developing. There are people in this space who have never met, who have never encountered each other, and we took time to introduce ourselves in the chats. And so you know a little bit about the fact that there are other people in this community who are doing some of this work. I've only been in Niagara for 5 years, and I have had the opportunity to get to know people and start to build a community here. Keep building that community. Community is important. We can do very little alone, and the strength and power of any movement comes from the collective. So community is good. It's beautiful. It's pleasurable. It's important. Equally pleasurable, and I don't know how you feel about this, is rest. Rest is important. And at this point in time, somebody recently reminded me, rest for many of us is a revolutionary act. It is important to be able to conserve strength for the various actions that need to happen. And so it's all right to say no to opportunities. It's all right to take some time to rest, to really take care of yourself, to go back to the places that bring you comfort, that bring you peace, and protect yourself in order to continue to do this work the next day. This is a long, long journey, and it has really sort of amplified in its energy lately, and that's amazing. And we can work with that and utilize that energy for a long time. But the work is longer than this energy burst will last. And so I invite us all to really make sure we're resting and protecting ourselves, and then really celebrating the victories. And there are so many. This work has been really, really successful lately. There have been many, many victories all over the place. People are really working at reallocating funding to support communities better. People are really working at ensuring there are equitable hiring practices, that media has fair and appropriate representation so that people can see themselves in the world and in their spaces. And so I'm really excited about what's happening, and it's so hard to take that time to celebrate and to embrace that joy, because we know there's so much more to be done, but there will always be work to be done. And I mean, Black Lives Matter right now is having a really, really important revolutionary moment. And there are actions happening and organizing happening all over the place. And thank you for those of you who are working in that and participating in it. But there's just so much. There's oppression all over the place. We need to think about that intersectionality, and our 2S LGBTQ+ folks are still struggling. Our Indigenous friends are still struggling. We need to think about class and the way that we marginalize some people so that some of us can find those dream existences that come at the expense of other people. And when we're looking around at our community and we're really looking at how we share and connect and relate to our brothers, our sisters, our non-binary siblings, when we look at the people in our lives and the people in our community, it really is important that we share the joy that comes, because there will be times when our wins are few and far between. And so when we are finding momentum, and when we are finding moments of success, of victory, of empowerment, of peace and equity, we need to take time to acknowledge that, so that we know what we're working towards, so that we know what the goal still is. We can keep in mind that there are possibilities for the future. And I really invite you to take those moments to celebrate, because it will keep you strong and help with the many days of revolution ahead of us. So
Awesome.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Shannon. Thank you very much. That was very inspirational as well. And you covered on so much. And I love your underlying theme of unity, because it's really is, it's for everybody to get in and do this work together. And I really look forward to having all of our awesome speakers back at some point. We are running a little bit behind schedule. So again, I want to say thank you to our wonderful keynote speakers for sharing so much in such a small amount of time, giving us all something to think about. We're going to move into the moderated Q&A. I just want to give some quick participation instructions. Unfortunately, we're looking at about 15 minutes for this moderated Q&A. We do hope that we can continue. I'm noticing in the chat that a few of us have already other things that we have to attend. So we've lost some of our participants, but that's okay, because the ones that are still here, I would just ask that you stay muted and raise your hand. There's an icon, or you can simply just raise your hand if you have video to raise your, to ask your question. So raise your hand so we can do this in an organized manner. You could also use the chat. Please note that all questions may not be answered, but if you do use them in the chat, we can save the chat and we can figure out which things that we'd like to revisit in our following sessions. So you guys, in case I don't have time a little bit later on, thank you all so very much for participating. I want to thank our keynote speakers. I want to thank the Community Connections staff. We haven't seen them behind the scenes. They've been doing a lot of work. So thank you so very much, Jillian. Thank you so very much, Amber. Thank you so very much, Josefina. Thank you, Irene. It couldn't have happened without everybody's hard work. And you know what? Thank you very much to this audience who showed up and had this conversation with us. So let's get going with the conversation, the Q&A. And again, if we lose anybody because Zoom times out on us, I want to remind everybody that we're going to be following up this conversation. We're going to be launching a session. We recognize that there is a lot of work, and we're in a position to do some of the work, so we're going to do that. We're not sure the format, we're not sure the forum, we're not sure names, but please know that this revolution will keep going. And I just want to thank you in advance for walking it with us. So let's look to our questions. And I also want to say thank you, Najma. I almost forgot, because without you, I wouldn't have this awesome background. So thank you. So let's take a peek at our questions. And so I'm just taking a look. Our lives are the revolution. Yes, you're absolutely right, Liz Hay. Our lives are the work, and our lives are the revolution. And if we're not going to do it for ourselves or our children or our children's children, then let's at least do it for those who do not have a voice currently, and let's make a way for them to have a voice, because again, there's just so many things that are wrong with our systems these days. Can't get right into it, but certainly, does anybody have a question they'd like to share? or would you like me to maybe create one? Because I still haven't had an opportunity to give you some of my sarcastic humor, some of my cynicism. So I'm gonna do some role play while I wait for some questions to pop up. Oh, well, there's a question. No, there's no question. There is a question. Can Cassandra provide an example how she speaks and comforts her son with darker eyes? Okay, I love that, because you know something. Let's go back to Cassandra until some questions pop up, because I do apologize for cutting you off. I noticed that you had almost finished presenting a point, so I'm turning the floor. I'm giving it back to you. It's all yours. Go ahead.
That's a great question. So one of the things in which I've been really actively working towards is diversifying my media. I noticed that a lot of the children's books I have had white protagonists. A lot of them have animals as well, but those with human beings, a lot of them are just, and even if that doesn't mean anything, it doesn't tell him that he's not worthy of being a protagonist or he's not worthy of being the hero of the story. It doesn't tell him that, but it does not tell him that. All it tells him is that it's not him every single time. So what I've been doing is really diversifying my books. I found a really good book source, and it's going to be among the resources that I will be providing in the handout that I created here, and you'll be receiving it by email as well. But just seeing that, so I definitely work to comfort it. I'm just like, dark guys are awesome. Do you know why? And then I do this thing where like the reason why mirrors reflect back the image so well is because of the black behind the, you know what I mean, the black behind the silver surface. That's why we can see ourselves in the mirror. So I do this thing where it's like, your eyes aren't black, they're not black, they're every single color that we see. So I hold up like different colors of things, and then like you see it reflect in the eyeballs, and then you work on how fascinating that is. I have a really good camera, so we take photos. And then it's like, look at all the different colors your eyes change. It's unbelievable. Not everyone can get Spider-Man in their eyeballs like you can. That's amazing. They're jealous, that's the kind of stuff that I do with them. I hold up a candle and it's beautiful, right?
Yeah, that's good.
That's awesome. That's great. Thank you so very much, Cassandra, for fielding that question. I do appreciate it. I'm seeing another question. I'm gonna give this to all speakers, and we're gonna see if we can find a way to, I guess, decide who's going to speak first. One of our questions are, how can a member of the community get involved who wants to help with doing the work? Whoever asked that question, I'm going to say you're already involved because you are present. So thank you so very much, Ms. Jillian. And I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Shari Darlene to answer that question.
What a great question. I'm getting that a lot also via email. A lot of people who attended the demonstration, they all want to know. Donate. There's a lot of chapters coming up in Niagara Falls. There's ours, Justice for Black Lives. We're on social media. I know the colleges, the universities, look for students of color, extend, ask them, stop them, ask them, are you involved in something? Is there something I can get involved with? I know there's Entwine in St. Catharines for people of color, and you don't have to be a person of color to get involved with this. This is what I think a lot of white people are afraid that they're going to come walking in the door, or, please don't be afraid. We're very accepting, and we want you to come through our door. We want you to be at the table with us. So absolutely go into the community and ask, even if you're uncomfortable or a little bit scared, just ask the question. The worst you're going to be told is not here, try there. So it's not going to be anything aggressive or anything like that, but just go and ask questions. Even if you see someone Black, you know what I mean? You can say, hey, with everything that's going on, do you know of any group but I think if you search on social media, or especially if you're a local in Niagara Falls, there's a lot of things that have come up in the last month that you can certainly go out and contribute to and be a part of.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you very much for that, Shari Darlene. You're absolutely right. And I want to remind everybody that if you do take that step and approach and engage in that conversation, just remember that everybody has a capacity for a varying degree of emotions. Some people might be in the anger stage. Some people might be in the, we'll leave it at that. So ultimately, just do not let your fear of participating overrule your willingness to participate. And again, in approaching anybody, just remember that their reaction is not exclusive to their race. You know, so let's just keep in our humanity as we have these conversations. Let's treat everybody respectfully. Thank you again, Ms. Sherry Darlene. It looks like we have another question. I can't see the name because there's so many popping in, but it's a great question. I would like the keynote speakers to take a look at. Do you think that spirituality has a role to play in decolonizing and revealing the implicit racism that is so often invisible? Well, that's a great question. Invisible, I'm not sure. Implicit, of course. Who would like to take that question? I could repeat it if you'd like. Do you think that spirituality has a role to play in decolonizing and revealing the implicit racism that is so often invisible?
That's a hard one.
That is a hard one, right? It was even hard to read the question.
Well, it is because a lot of people believe a lot of different things, right? So it's really hard to really narrow in on that one. I guess it's all about what is in your spirit and what is in your soul and what's going to get you to lead forward and step up. And it's kind of hard to answer that. I would say lead with love.
There we go. Absolutely. Beautiful. Because at the end of the day, we all love. I would like to think we all have the capacity for love. And as far as the spiritual journey, we can acknowledge that there are those who are at varying stages in their spiritual journey. Does it have a lot to do with decolonizing and revealing implicit racism that is so often invisible? Absolutely. Is it one of those ingredients in this recipe that we're moving towards? Absolutely. And this is where it's impossible to hone in, to narrow down on just one specific factor of anti-racist work. It's the scale and the magnitude, the programming, the history, the emotions. There's so many varying components that we have to really take a look at. And it's amazing that we're finally at a time where our society is ready to have those conversations. So seeing what's happening everywhere else in the world, we know that people are willing to do the work. So let's continue on. Thank you for that question. Looking at another question. From Tyler Tapscott, we have, at our center, we work alongside immigrants and newcomers in Niagara. Could you please speak to what has helped you move through fears and insecurities about speaking up or talking about racism? Okay, that one almost seems like it's directed to me because I am working at the center and the rest of our keynote speakers are not. So unless one of our awesome team from Community Connections would like to field that, I want to mention that our organization sees we see an intersection. Certainly the newcomer clientele that we serve, absolutely positively we want to empower them. We want to make sure that they are able to assimilate Canadian culture and have a rich experience during their transition. So again, it's not too far off. The intersection between immigrant rights and newcomer rights, migrant workers, it's in the same family of work that we're trying to do. So what is our center doing? We're doing things like having this conversation. We're committing ourselves to having further conversations. We're making sure that we use this momentum that is going right now to really continue to cast a spotlight on this conversation. We're probably going to incorporate it into our programming, but I don't want to get too far ahead of myself. I'm certain that our executive director will give us the direction once the time has come. So I'm hoping that I was able to answer that question fairly well. And if I was not able to, I hope that I can present a better answer at a later time, unless one of my beautiful team would like to speak on that question. And I don't see anybody from the beautiful team speaking on the question. So, oh, do I hear somebody? No?
Nope.
No? Okay, awesome. Well, I assure you, even though they just left me out there in the spotlight, they are a dynamic team. They're talented. They're amazing. They always surprise me with some of the things they do. And I would encourage anybody who has not been to one of our events, just to check out our website, visit some of our social media, just to get an idea of the amazing things that, that this organization is doing. And so I'm going to take another look at a question.
Hello, Edmund.
Oh, hello, Jillian. Yay.
How are you?
I'm great. How are you doing?
Hey, not bad. Enjoying
Wonderful.
the event. Thanks for asking.
You're welcome.
Just wondering, we had an awesome question from Bree, who actually volunteers at our center. Sorry to put you on the spotlight there, Bree. I'm wondering if we can poke back to that question. It's fantastic.
Okay, I'm seeing as an LGBTQ individual, is that the question? Who attended the June 6th protest in solidarity, especially with my fellow LGBTQ friends of color. How do we, as allies, properly uplift the voices of the Black community without speaking over them? Wow. Okay.
Great question.
So that's an amazing question, Bree. I don't know the specific answer. The only thing that I would draw from is I would say that when we think about strategies and when we explore history and what it has taught us, we could recognize that the strategy is to divide and to conquer, right? So I love the idea that you want to uplift the voices, and I love the idea that you don't want to speak over them. But I would remind you that we are all unified in this one cause, and that cause is anti-racism work. So if we approach a situation where we have community members from one side, community members from another side, it's amazing that we're even considering speaking over them. Ultimately, I would love to say that your voice, it being there and being shared, even if it is speaking over another voice that's there being shared, it's still being shared in that one unified message, which is we are no longer going to tolerate racism. So again, I'm not encouraging. Sorry?
This is Shannon. I'd just like to jump in if that's all right, because I am queer. And so I would love a chance to respond to
Absolutely.
their question. So thanks for that question, Bree. And it's come up a lot. And there's been a lot of conversations specifically about the Niagara community, because there isn't really an active or loud voice for BIPOC to LGBTQ folks. And that is something that is actively changing as we speak, so that's great. Tomorrow night, there is actually a Black and Indigenous Pride concert, and it's being hosted by a number of community collaborators. And I know that during that time, there will also be some discussion in response to that question, and potentially some announcements that I will address here because they're not my stuff, but there's some stuff coming up to help amplify the voices of BIPOC queer folks and the 2S LGBTQ community in Niagara. And so please keep an eye out for it, and we can work together on figuring out how allies can support and how we can work together for good things for everyone.
Awesome.
Yes, please do reach out, Bree.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Shannon. Thank you. I do appreciate you taking that one for me. And I would love to say that as far as networks go, and as far as communities go, as far as us communicating with each other, I think at some point we're going to develop a hub, a general hub for these ongoing communications and ongoing discussions. At this point, I'm not exactly sure. I think we're going to collect the information from this presentation. We're going to take a look at all the contact information. I think our organization is positioning ourselves to be that funnel for the ongoing conversations. So as community events pop up, as different resources are shared, we're going to make every effort to reshare with anybody who's interested and anybody who follows up on our social media to this particular post. So I do believe we're going to open it up. Again, I'm not 100% certain, but we would love to take on that role. Jillian, did you have something to add? No? Okay, awesome. Now, again, I tried, but I just couldn't get her to. So again, because I'm uncertain, I'm not sure how much Zoom is going to give us some leeway. So I just want to take a second to remind everybody that we're so thankful that you joined us today. We were really appreciative of the turnout that we had. We're really thankful to the contributors, to the participants, our keynote speakers. Oh my goodness, amazing, amazing, amazing. At some point, I think we're going to try to just have each and every one of you, kind of addressing or sharing or possibly facilitating. Again, we're not sure what that looks like, but everybody who was here today is going to receive an email with the recording and the resources and more information on the upcoming sessions. So that's the beautiful thing about Zoom, not to give them an advertising op, but Zoom does allow you to record the video. They do allow you to save the chat. So this is why we really encouraged everybody to get in there and type their messages so that way we can come back and share again. If I may take a second, I'm wondering if we can celebrate this monumentous moment. And just anybody who has their video showing, I just want you to raise a fist with me as we stand in solidarity for everybody who's willing to join in the work of anti-racism. As we seek for that recipe, because I think we're going to try to do a screen share. So it's one time. Let's see if we can get everybody to raise a fist. Can we raise a fist? And can we just hold it? Hold it, hold it, hold it. How many times can I say hold it before somebody says hold it? Anybody get a screen share? Awesome, awesome. And thank you so very much, everybody. This is great. I love this. 2020, you know what? You're not going to hold us back, 2020. This is the time that we take back we're taking it all back. So this is great. So I'm just going to open up the floor again for any more discussions that we can have before we time out. So I'm looking for anybody who might have questions, anybody who might have comments, anybody who might have something to share. I'm looking to my amazing team, Community Connections. Amber, would you like to share anything? Najma, would you like to share anything? Jillian, anything?
I've got something.
Oh, Sam's got something. It's all yours, Sam.
I'm gonna just start off by saying I love what was discussed on today. I love the conversation that's being had. A lot of important topics came up. I'm gonna just take note of a few. I'm gonna start off by just what recently we started talking about with the role of the LGBTQ plus community and the Black and Indigenous community, people of color, all of these different groups coming together to really push this message that we're coming as one people, we're coming as a community. And I think just to elaborate on that, as someone who's working with representatives of each of these communities that we're speaking on, we have us as friends, because we started off as friends. I'm referring to the Niagara Activists, which is our group. Our vision is to almost have a world which is like our friendship, So to allow that to happen, we need to make sure that we amplify the voices that are going through different things, and we amplify the voices that are not necessarily being heard. But to also, if you have a voice already, give guidance to those who are trying to find their voice. So I just want to add that as a little key note, if you want to say it that way, just to guide my stance on this conversation. So yeah, I just want to say thank you to everybody already, and I appreciate what's going on.
Awesome. That's great. Thank you so very much, Sam, for adding that. I'm turning it over to any one of our other keynote speakers who would like to add something further.
I just want to finish with a very powerful statement that I have come across throughout this journey. And it is that you can choose to look away, but never, ever again can you say you didn't know.
Whoa.
So with that, again, I can't stress how much we're in this together, and the unity is so important, and there's no room for division. Do you know what I mean? There's no room for division. We all communities, indigenous. I'm not going to try to remember the LGBTQ. I never get it right, but that's exactly what I mean. We all have to come together, unite, and we can do this together, because I really believe that change it's going to come. I don't believe it's going to be like it has been in the last 50, 60 years. I believe real change is on its way.
Okay, awesome. I stand in agreement with you, Ms. Sherry Darlene. I do believe real change is on its way, and I do believe that we're going to continue having these conversations. We're going to continue doing the work, and again, it's nice to see that we're looking towards standing unified, because there's no point in us trying to break down these systems on our own. Let's get together. Let's let them know that that we the people have had enough. We the people are deciding to stand together, because we the people we're ready for that change. Absolutely. Najma, did you have anything to add? Jillian, anything to add? Josefina over there with her participants, anything to add? Because I love this. I love this so much. But I got to tell you, I've been drinking a lot of water, and get one of these cups. Yeah, I could use it. But anybody want to share anything else? No? Okay, awesome. Well, again, I'm going to say thank you to everybody who joined us. I sincerely appreciate the opportunity to be the moderator for this session. I loved everything that came up. I'm not gonna lie, to be honest, I had no idea what I was going to say. And I'm glad that everybody else had the words for me. And and it's even in that in the fact that we all have the words for each other. It goes to show that the energy that we're putting towards this anti-racism work, it's going to be fluid, because it's a good movement, and we're doing this not just for our city of St. Catharines. We're not just doing it for Niagara Falls. We're not just doing it for the Niagara region. We're not just doing it for Ontario. We're doing this for the world, and if the rest of the world is also investing their energy in the same sort of movements, then we really will see a change, and that change will come. So again, just thank you so much to everybody who joined us. Looking forward to seeing you all again, and I really hope that everybody gets a chance to enjoy the sunshine. Just want to say on behalf of the Niagara Folk Arts Multicultural Center and the Community Connections team, happy Friday, everybody. Thank you for making this the most wonderful Friday of 2020. Thank you very much. Everybody have a great day. We'll see you again soon. We're going to sign off now, but again, we're going to make everything available for everybody who participated. And as soon as it's available, we encourage you to share it on your various social media outlets, have those conversations, and just again, wishing you all the best. Nothing but love for all of you. Happy Friday.
Hi, everyone. Take care.
Adam, Mike, I drop it.
Thanks.